as oil shocks sent gas prices soaring.
Back in 73, the oil crisis, we have to rethink what kind of vehicles that we want to sell. It was much harder for the domestic automakers because they used to sell bigger vehicles.
And Detroit wasn't ready. Detroit didn't have the fuel-efficient cars that baby boomers were demanding, and they all turned to Toyota and Honda.
Some people would say a bankruptcy by Ford or GM is hyperbole, but bankruptcy would be the leverage they need over President Biden because we know part of his administration's agenda is the proliferation of EVs and renewable energy. The reasoning is becoming clear as day. The UAW strike isn't just a strike for higher wages, more retirement and health benefits and job security. It's a war versus electric vehicles and the automakers' transition to it. If the momentum of these negotiations keep going the way it is, EVs and the environment look to be the losers of this battle. So what is the plan of action for this battle exactly?
It is not necessarily a foregone conclusion that the US will be able to make this transition without some real casualties along the way.
It starts with crying and screaming at the government, in the form of lobbying, and the initial skirmishes have just started, with Reuters reporting the Alliance for Automotive Innovation, a group representing car makers like General Motors, Toyota, Hyundai, and Volkswagen, argued that the NHTSA's corporate average fuel economy proposal was, quote, a de facto battery electric vehicle mandate, and that it was unreasonable, but then kindly asked for changes from the government body. Why are they wanting these requirements changed? Well, it's because of the penalties that would be imposed on the manufacturers who aren't complying with these requirements for fuel efficiency. They challenged the administration, saying they'll have to increase costs by over $3,000 per car, and adding, quote, it would have absolutely no environmental or fuel savings benefits. Well, yeah, because the car makers don't want to change the fuel economy of their cars, obviously. But it wasn't just the AAI lobby going after these regulations. Recently, the American Automotive Policy Council, who represents the Detroit Three, complained that the legacy OEMs would be paying billions in fines, but their ire wasn't directed at NHTSA, but the Department of Energy, who wants to update how the petroleum equivalency factor is calculated. A change to this calculation will reduce the MPGE, or miles per gallon gasoline equivalent. But how does that hurt Ford, GM, and Stellantis, who the council is lobbying for? Well, if MPGE of their electric vehicles were calculated stricter, with MPGE being lowered for their cars, it would mean their entire fleet is now less fuel efficient, leading to even more penalties. Unironically, Tesla proposed tougher restrictions on internal combustion cars this past summer, penning a letter to the EPA asking them to beef up their standards so that by 2032, 69% of cars would be EVs. So if step one of the plan was to show the Biden administration their policies would increase costs on the average consumer, step two of the plan would be the OEMs scaling back their EV ambitions to rein in costs to pay their union workforce more, or so they claim, making Biden choose between his green agenda or the financial health of some of the largest employers in the country, directly and indirectly.
Meantime, General Motors has announced it will delay production of electric trucks at their Orion Township plant due to slowing American demand for EVs and to make engineering changes. They said the plant will make electric Chevy Silverado and GMC pickups in the late 2025 era rather than 2024. In the meantime,
it was just today General Motors chose to delay production of their EV pickup trucks for 2 years. The Chevrolet Silverado and the GMC Sierra, saying it had nothing to do with the UAW strikes, but instead, quote, to better manage capital investment while aligning with evolving EV demand. GM continued, in addition, we have identified engineering improvements that we will implement to increase the profitability of our products. I think it's a telling pair of quotes because it's essentially doublespeak. If your labor costs are increasing because you're caving to UAW demands for higher pay and increased benefits, but you say you're delaying your EV pickup trucks until late 2025 because you want to reduce costs associated with making the vehicles, it seems like something's off. It could be the fact they only delivered 18 EV pickup trucks last quarter, or they really don't want to make EVs at all. And the market kind of likes what the automakers are doing, with both Ford and GM stock going up today when they heard about the news of the EV pickup trucks. Oh, what did Ford do about their EV pickup trucks? Great question.
Yeah, it's sort of more bad news in the world of EVs potentially. Here in this case, Ford confirming that they're shutting down a production shift for their F-150 Lightning, that really well-received EV pickup. Basically, you're seeing this number right here, Q3 sales down almost 50%, not a good number there. But basically, Ford saying we're shutting down a shift there temporarily for the Lightning due to supply chain issues, due to some sort of delivery.
So Ford eliminated one of their 3 shifts for their F-150 Lightning EV line. But they too said it had nothing to do with UAW's ongoing strike, and instead said, we are adjusting the schedule at our Rogue Electric Vehicle Center because of multiple constraints, including the supply chain and working through processing and delivering vehicles held for quality checks after restarting production in August. And remember, this comes on the back of a $7,500 price cut on existing F-150 Lightnings and a considerable drop in sales as noted in the Yahoo Finance piece. This announcement comes a day after Executive Chair Bill Ford Jr. made a plea to the UAW to come to an affordable agreement. But Shawn Fain rebutted all of Ford's talking points, including a now famous one-liner.
Meanwhile, Jim Farley took in $21 million last year. We need him to do two things right now. Look in the mirror and look in Ford's bank account. Go get the big checkbook. The one Ford uses when it wants to spend millions on company executives or on Wall Street giveaways.
Take out the big checkbook, he says. Well, has Ford not done that yet? Let's take a look at the progression of the UAW negotiations with a chart from Automotive News that shows Ford's, GM's, and Stellantis' current proposals compared to what the UAW is demanding. Wages. Ford is looking to provide 23% more, and by the way, that's on top of a recent raise right before the strike started. GM is at 20% with half up front basically, and Stellantis is similar to GM. The UAW is demanding 36% more, which is already a compromise from their 40% demand. Wage growing, and this is important and both parties are wide apart on this issue. Ford is at 3 years, and GM Stellantis are in line at 4 years, whilst the UAW is demanding 90 days for the wage increases to take effect. The Detroit Three want to slowly phase in those wage increases, and the UAW is not having any of that, as they believe they waited long enough. And if they were to wait 4 years, then that means they only get to enjoy maximum wage increases for about a year before negotiations on a new contract need to begin again. Tiers. Ford is looking to do away with tiers after 3 years. GM only looking to get rid of tiers in customer care and after sales, along with General Motors component holdings. Stellantis wants to wait 4 years or after the grow-in to get rid of tiers. UAW, of course, wants tiers done away with immediately, meaning full pay for their workers from the day they're hired. Temporary workers. Most of the Detroit Three are in line, $20 to $21, with a conversion to full-time after a couple weeks or months. UAW wants temporary workers made full-time workers immediately, which means full-time pay and benefits as well. Ratification bonus, a signing bonus essentially that Ford and GM are willing to pay, $6,500 and $5,500 respectively, whereas Stellantis isn't interested. The UAW doesn't really care though, they just want a good long-term contract. COLA has most of the OEMs in agreement, with it being restored in some respect, with the UAW already mentioning that they made progress on cost of living adjustments in previous press conferences. Vacation time is next. 5 weeks is agreed upon by Ford and GM, but not by Stellantis. Most of us know the UAW is more concerned about a 4-day work week, but more time off is something anyone would appreciate. Layoff protection. This is similar to the job bank system from yesteryear, but the big three are looking to reduce the amount of time considerably, where in 2008 it was 2 years, and in 2023 it might be a few weeks. Right to strike conditions would likely be accepted by all three car makers though. Retirement benefits is a huge sticking point for Detroit, with all agreeing to increase 401k contributions and GM looking to increase contributions for healthcare, but the UAW is wanting pensions. I don't think we'll ever see the big three agree to that, and if they do, they might as well file for bankruptcy. It'll be backbreaking financially for most any company to go back to the days of pensions. It looks like in some areas the parties are close, or in agreement, but the important points from my perspective seem to have the union and the OEMs far apart, and that is of course wages and retirement. But how much longer can this strike go on? From the car company's point of view, can they sustain losing what Anderson Economic Group's research says is $7.7 billion so far? From the unionized workers' side, they've lost $359 million in wages. We know that dealers are flush with cars, with Dealer Trade Network on X estimating 85 days of supply, which comes from the buildup the automakers did in light of the oncoming strikes, and the fact interest rates on car loans are through the roof. How about the UAW? How long can they keep up the strike? There are 34,000 workers currently on strike, and they all receive $100 a day from the strike fund the UAW has saved up years for. It was estimated at $825 million from September, and the current burn rate is around $17 million a week. Should the strike expand its scope, of course that rate goes up, but as things stand now, the UAW has months of runway. There's a caveat. Workers are being laid off at suppliers and even at car makers as factories run out of parts, or maybe they make too many parts, and it doesn't make financial sense for the companies to keep those facilities open. These laid off workers are for sure pressuring the union to get this resolved as soon as possible, as they don't get any benefit of strike pay. It is estimated at least 6,000 workers have been let go since the beginning of the strike. Ford, GM, and somewhat Stellantis are being forced in the corner of smaller profits, higher costs, and increased regulation. Something has to give, and perhaps step 3 of their battle plan is the threat or the filing of bankruptcy, which could give them the upper hand against the fuel economy standards, the electric vehicle transition, and the UAW's wage increases.
And a new threat is looming in the form of a technology that's crucial in the fight against climate change, which unions fear will lead to even fewer jobs and lower pay. electric vehicles.